For today's video, we are going to be talking about contracts and the different type of contracts that there are. So to start, what is a contract? Well, a contract is a mutual promise between parties, and this contract cannot be illegal, nor can it be impossible. A contract creates a legal relationship between both parties. Here's an example. Let's say Sarah offers John $70 to buy his bike. John will in return give Sarah the bike for $70. This here is an example of a contract. There are 5 elements when it comes to contracts. The first is the offer. Here, Sarah offers $50 for John's bike. The second element would be acceptance. This is where John will say, okay, I will sell you my bike. This then leads us into our third element, consideration. This is where John can say, I'll sell you my bike, but for $70 instead of $50. The fourth element is capacity. Does Sarah have the capacity to spend $70 on this bike? That leads us to our last element, which is legality. Is it legal for Sarah to buy the bike, and is it legal for John to sell it? Now that we have that down, we can talk about the different types of contracts. There are 5 different types of contracts: bilateral, unilateral, express, implied, and quasi. We're going to go through each of these one by one. First up is going to be bilateral contracts. In this example, Sarah is offering to pay $70 for John's bike. In return, John will give her the bike. This is a bilateral contract because the promise, rights, and duties are on both sides. Now, let's say that John were to give Sarah the bike only if she got straight A's. This is a unilateral contract because the promise is on one side. It's from John's side. Now we can talk about express and implied contracts. An express contract can be done verbally or it can be done written. Either of these forms is a valid form of an express contract. An implied contract is done based on actions. Let's say you were to go to a restaurant, you sit down, take your menu, and you order your food from your waitress, and she brings your food. Because you are at a restaurant, you know that you are supposed to pay. This is an implied contract. The next type of contract is a quasi-contract. Now, a quasi-contract is a contract by law, meaning that if it is not complete by law, you are allowed to do something. For example, this is Stacy. Stacy ordered a pizza from some unknown pizza chain, and instead of getting delivered to her, it was delivered to another girl, not Stacy. Now, Stacy can either sue the pizza company or sue the other girl for the price of her pizza. A little extreme, but she chose to go that way. The next 2 types of contracts are executed and executory contracts. In an executed contract, the contract has already been completed. It's already done to its fullest. I like to remember this by remembering that completed ends in ed, and so does executed. An executory contract is a contract that has not yet been fully completed, so it's not done or it hasn't even been started yet. Next up are valid and unenforceable contracts. A valid contract has all 5 elements present. There was an offer, an acceptance, consideration, capacity, and legality. An unenforceable contract is a valid contract with legitimate defense, but this does not mean that the contract can be enforced. An example of this would be the alteration of the contract without knowledge to the other party. Let's take Sarah and John, for example. In the original contract, Sarah tells John that she will pay him $70 for the bike, and in return, John gives her the bike. In this case, Sarah then decides without telling John, I'm only going to pay $20 for the bike. John did not consent to this, therefore making it an unenforceable change within the contract. 2 more examples are void and voidable contracts. A void contract has no legal obligations. Let's say, for example, Sarah and John are trading the money and the bike. If John does not own the bike, the contract now becomes void because it's illegal for him to sell it since it is not his. Next is voidable contracts. Voidable contracts can be avoided by one or both parties. A great example of this is minor signing a contract. Because the minor is under 18 in this situation, they are allowed to make the contract voidable at any point. The last 2 types of contracts I'll be speaking about today are informal and formal contracts. An informal contract is more of a day-to-day type of contract. It can be spoken, and that's typically the way that it's delivered. Let's say you and your neighbor were speaking about you walking his dog every day for $5, and you both agree. This is a type of informal contract. Another type of informal contract would be you shaking hands with a friend for a bet or for a deal that you guys have made. This is an informal contract. There is then a formal contract. A formal contract is written, signed by all parties involved, and sealed, and then a copy is delivered to all parties. Now, an example of this would be a wedding makeup artist. You meet with the artist, tell them the time and the day, and then a contract is written up for pricing and everything else involved. Both of you sign, and both of you receive a copy of this contract. This is a formal contract. I hope this video was able to help understand contracts a bit more, as it can be a pretty long chapter and pretty confusing at times.